Hey there, friend. What do building materials, our construction industry, misalignment, if not complete disconnection between sales and marketing, and IBM in the early 1990s have in common? Well, more than you'd think. In 1993, a gentleman named Lou Gerstner walked into IBM as an outsider who didn't know anything about computers and took over a company that was massive, global in nature and reach, and it was breaking down from the inside. And not because of strategy and not because of talent, but because of silos and the lack of integration. In his book, Who Says Elephants Can't Dance?, Gerstner tells the story of how he turned it around, and the lessons translate directly to construction and building materials today. So if you've ever felt like your team isn't aligned, this episode and these insights and this book are for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Construction Leadership Podcast, where we help construction executives lead high-performing teams that finish on time and under budget without all the firefighting and babysitting, so you can lead with focus and control. I am your host, Bradley Hartmann. Have you ever heard the phrase, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM? Think about that for a minute. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. How unbelievably dominant and amazing and effective do you have to be when generations of business professionals know that this is just something people say? Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. If you were born anytime, I would say before, maybe 1982, you would know that line. Or if you're a student of corporate history, you would know that as well. And my guess is in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that was absolutely true. But you want to know who gets fired for buying IBM? I'll tell you, whoever was about to buy shares in IBM in early 1993 when it was $43 a share, only to have it plummet to $12 less than a year later. Sales were going down precipitously from $13 billion in 1990 to $7 billion in 93. And the speed at which it was going down was only getting faster. What was happening? It was this initial transition from mainframe computers, the ones that were so big they were either the size of your refrigerator or maybe your entire kitchen. They were transitioning to personal computing. And IBM was not handling this well. There were too many teams, not enough coordination. And everyone thinks that the problem is out there when the problem was inside the walls. So in steps Lou Gerstner, and he was an outsider. The biggest risk that he thought he had, as well as the industry, is that he wasn't a computer guy. He worked at American Express, and before that, he was part of Nabisco when the famous takeover by KKR, which was chronicled in the book Barbarians at the Gate. And IBM was on a collision course with total collapse. Not that you'd know it from being inside. The company didn't lack for smart, talented people. Its problems were not fundamentally technical in nature. It had file drawers full of winning strategies. Yet, the company was frozen in place. What it needed was someone to grab hold of it and shake it back into action. And that's exactly what he did. When he stepped into the role in 1993, they were already in the process of breaking it apart. And they said, you know what? IBM is more valuable as independent business units. So they were hiring all sorts of Wall Street analysts to come in to value it, to give it new brand names so they could chunk it off and to sell it into a million different pieces. However, Lou did the opposite. He kept it together. But this isn't a story about technology. It's a story about silos and what it takes to break them and integrate a company, any company, large or small. Now, this book has been extremely relevant and useful for me because we are working with two different companies in the construction industry, and both of these are naturally siloed. They're very large. There's different products and different people and different processes. And if you've been listening to any of our recent episodes about this idea of silos, you know silos aren't necessarily bad. Silos are naturally occurring when we get specialists, experts together, and those are good. The problem is we don't bridge these silos together with communication. And construction, we know we are naturally siloed. We got sales versus operations. We got the yard versus the office. We have estimating versus the field, right? And with scale becomes increased complexity. So as Lou Gerstner entered into IBM, he really just started observing, and these observations about IBM are rather humorous, but he quickly determined that IBM didn't have a product problem and it didn't have a people problem. It had a behavior problem. And these different units, they acted like separate companies. They had their own little fiefdom. There was no incentive to collaborate, something we're going to come back to here shortly. And the real competition was internally with each other for resources, for status. And there wasn't this passion to really focus on the customer. And Lou highlights some other funny things. He noticed that there was no computer on the desk of the CEO. He thought, well, that's odd because, this is a computer company. That doesn't look good. He kept on hearing over and over again executives say, well, IBM doesn't lay people off. We've never done that. And Lou said, hey, stop saying that. We are dying here. And then he goes to his first board meeting and he can't believe it. Everyone is there acting like everything is fine. And they actually approve an acquisition of $440 million that Lou didn't know anything about. This was his first day, his first board meeting. He's like, these people are delusional. They were in these silos with zero communication with each other and certainly the outside world. As Lou Gerstner was getting the dog and pony show, they led him over and they said, you have to meet right away this legend in the industry. His name is Walt Burdick. And Walt was essentially the personification of the culture of IBM. He was known as the Dean of HR Professionals in America. Gerstner writes, Walt Burdick's primary interests were structure and process. In fact, after his departure, someone gave me one of the most remarkable documents I have ever seen. Roughly 60 pages long, it is entitled, On Being the Administrative Assistant to W.E. Burdick, Vice President, Personnel Plans and Programs. It was written on March 17, 1975, and illustrated some of the suffocating extremes one could find all too easily in the IBM culture. The instructions for an AA in Burdick's office included white shirt and suit jacket at all times. Keep a supply of dimes with you. They are helpful when W.E.B., Burdick, has to make a call when away from the building. Surprise birthday parties for W.E.B. staff should be scheduled under the heading Miscellaneous for 15 minutes. Birthday cakes, forks, napkins, and cake knife are handled by W.E.B.'s secretary. AA, take seat closest to the door to answer phones. W.E.B. has 3 clocks, one on desk, one on table, and one on windowsill outside your office. All 3 should be reset daily. Call 9-637-8537 for correct time. W.E.B. enjoys Carefree Spearmint Sugarless Gum. When empty box appears in out basket, reserve box should be put in his desk and new reserve box purchased. He then points out that goes on for another 60 pages. As Gerstner began to figure out where he should begin his reductions in force, he noticed that 23,000 out of 90,000 employees were support personnel. These are executive assistants and admin. So that was an easy spot. He noted that in the company, there were 128 CIOs, Chief Information Officers. And it took him several weeks to actually figure that out because this was a matrix organization. There was not one budget, but 2 or 3, because each element of the IBM organization matrix, e.g., the geographic units versus the product divisions, insisted on its own budget. As a result, there really wasn't one single consolidated budget. Allocations were constantly debated and changed, and accountability was extremely difficult to determine. And because there were so many individual fiefdoms, they all had their own data centers. So there were 155 data centers at IBM. Soon enough, they narrowed that down to 6. And because of all these various fiefdoms, each one got to hire its own marketing company. So the marketing was not only muddled and ineffective, there were 70 different ad agencies that were getting paid by IBM. Gerstner made the change and brought it down to 1. Obviously, the culture had to change, and Gerstner wanted to make sure he was crystal clear. So, thinking of Walt Burdick's 60-page memo on how to bring dimes and buy new gum for their master, he was going to make it super simple. So here's what Gerstner wrote. Everyone here starts with a clean slate. Neither your successes nor failures in the past count with me. I went on to summarize my management philosophy and practice. I manage by principle, not procedure. The marketplace dictates everything we should do. I'm a big believer in quality, strong competitive strategies and plans, teamwork, payoff for performance, and ethical responsibility. I look for people who work to solve problems and help colleagues. I sack politicians. I'm heavily involved in strategy. The rest is yours to implement. Just keep me informed in an informal way. Don't hide bad information. I hate surprises. Don't try to blow things by me. Solve problems laterally. Don't keep bringing them up the line. Move fast. If we make mistakes, let them be because we are too fast rather than too slow. Hierarchy means very little to me. Let's put together in meetings the people who can help solve a problem regardless of position. Reduce committees and meetings to a minimum. No committee decision making. Let's have lots of candid, straightforward communications. I don't completely understand the technology. I'll need to learn it, but don't expect me to master it. The unit leaders must be the translators into business terms for me. So Gerstner went back to the proverbial blocking and tackling, and he identified 5 things. And he said, listen, we're going to focus on these 5 things, and anything that can help us do this can be included, and we will invest in it. Anything that won't, we're going to get rid of it. And those things were focus, speed, customers, teamwork, and pride. There's an old saying that you never want to waste a crisis, and you really want to leverage that sense of urgency while you have everyone's attention. And that's what Gerstner did. There were no easy solutions to its problems. The IBM organization, so full of brilliant, insightful people, would have loved to receive a bold recipe for success. The more sophisticated, the more complicated the recipe, the better everyone would have liked it. It wasn't going to work that way. The real issue was going out and making things happen every day in the marketplace. Our products weren't bad. Our people were good people. Our customers had long, successful relationships with us. We just weren't getting the job done. As I said frequently to IBMers those days, if you don't like the pain, the only answer is to move the pain onto the backs of your competitors. They're the ones who have taken away your net worth. They're the ones who made it more difficult to send your children and grandchildren to college. The answer is to shift the pain to them and return IBM to a world of success. The key to any successful corporate transformation is public acknowledgement of the existence of a crisis. If employees do not believe a crisis exists, they will not make the sacrifices that are necessary to change. Nobody likes change. Whether you are a senior executive or an entry-level employee, change represents uncertainty and potentially pain. All of this takes enormous commitment from the CEO to communicate, and then communicate some more. No institutional transformation takes place, I believe, without a multi-year commitment by the CEO to put himself or herself constantly in front of employees and speak in plain, simple, compelling language that drives conviction and action throughout the organization. And a big part of the pain that, yes, he inflicted and the change that was required came down to compensation. Near the end of the book, he writes, I knew we could not get the integration we needed at IBM without introducing massive changes to the measurement and compensation system. When a CEO tells me that he or she is considering a major reintegration of his or her company, I try to say politely, if you are not prepared to manage your compensation this way, you should probably not proceed. Measuring financial results is the same issue. We were never able to move to an integrated customer view rather than a geographic view until we stopped creating P&L statements for the geographic units. Of course, many of the geographic leaders went ballistic. We can't manage our business without P&L oversight. Sorry, I said, you no longer manage a business. You now serve as a critical support function to our integrated, worldwide customer organization. And the obvious question and answer is, did it work? Well, when Gerstner took over in 1993, they were in an absolute freefall, and the end of that year, they had lost 15% of their overall value. Starting in 1994, going to 2001, up 41%, up 60%, up 47%, up 29%, up 63%, up 6%, up 25%, up 34%. So yeah, it worked. Now, as we think about the construction industry, we know where silos are going to show up. We know where these different groups of experts are looking at the world completely different and also failing to communicate. It's sales versus operations. It's field versus office. It's these different locations. If you have different product lines of commodity products or specialty products or distribution or anything else, this is where they're going to act in their own self-interest. So a few questions for leaders become, where do we compete internally instead of externally? Where are handoffs breaking down? And what behaviors are we actually rewarding? Because you don't fix silos with memos, you fix them with conversations and accountability and, yes, a change in compensation plan. Remember the classic line from Charlie Munger, who said, if you get the incentives right, everything else gets easier. Lou Gerstner didn't save IBM with a grand vision. He saved it by forcing people to work together better. So the question isn't whether or not you have silos, the question is whether or not you're willing to break them, either in small ways to drive communication or large ways to better serve customers. And with all these silos and the discussions that we're having with our clients, the individuals that are being left behind are the actual customers. And what's exciting is these organizations are already, by most measures, really successful. But when they're not integrated, man, they're leaving so much on the table. They can be so much more powerful, and they could really take advantage of their size and scale to capture more market share. And that, my friends, is why this is titled, Who Says Elephants Can't Dance? Inside IBM's Historic Turnaround by Louis Gerstner Jr. I'd strongly recommend it to a friend. That's all I've got. Thanks for listening. You are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.